So, innovation in construction, right? This lecture is divided into three sections. The first is about understanding the topic in the context. The topic, it is very important for us to understand the topics before we get moving into the topic, because there are a few new terms that I'm going to be talking about. One of those is called technology entrepreneurship. So we know what technology is, we know what entrepreneurship is, but then what happens when we put these two terms together and we try to enhance our construction industry? So similarly, there are a few topics that needs to be introduced. The second part is about understanding the ongoing practices. Here, we will be looking at examples of revolutionary construction projects, and then at the same time, what is the difference between the understanding of innovation in already developed economies where we see these magnificent construction structures, and then what's missing in our economy, or what is missing in economies like Nepal, right? So that is what we're going to be talking about in part two. You take a switch gorera and this was you permission grant gorera and say partner raising, so that's a bit of a hassle raising. So then the part three is called the how can we. So how can we incorporate these micro innovation practices, these technology entrepreneurship practices in our day-to-day operations, in our businesses, and how can we make things better, right? So these are the three parts of this guest lecture session. So approximately this will take us an hour and a half, and we will have a bit of time for question answer rounds as well. So the first thing that I want to say is that we've all heard this term, necessity is the mother of invention, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. I would like to take that statement a bit further and say that necessity is actually the mother of micro innovation. By the end of today's guest lecture, you will perhaps understand why actually necessity is in fact the mother of micro innovation. It's just specifying a bit more. It's not like it's not the mother invention, but to be more specific, you will understand why it is actually the mother of micro innovation, right? So Sunita ma'am, early summer, everything is clear, hopefully, right? The audio and the video.
Yes, it's clear here.
Allah.
In university. Sorry, Trishik.
I'm just making sure. Allah. So the first thing we need to understand is why is this topic important? Why is innovation study important? So there's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is because innovation itself is a very important topic. Understanding innovation studying innovation is important because this whole topic of making new things and improving the way that we do things, it is quite, and that is actually true to some extent because we don't have the capital required to establish these giant factories and make these revolutionary products. To that extent, it is correct. But it's not all that innovation is, and that is the purpose of today's guest lecture. It's not all about making revolutionary products. Innovation does not have to be limited to just by saying just by limited to making revolutionary products. There's much more. There are levels to innovation that we need to understand. The second thing is identification of drivers, barriers, and enablers of innovation. So there are some things that drive innovation. There are some things that are pushing companies to innovate. Those are called the drivers. Then there are the barriers. There are restrictions that companies need to face, that countries need to face in order to innovate. And then at the end, there are enablers. What allows us to move past these barriers and reinforce these drivers? These are called the enablers. What enables us to go past these barriers and innovate? Right? So the third one is understanding how the competition might be viewing or using innovative practices to get ahead. Now this is where we start to get a bit competitive. People say that innovating is costly or expensive, right? But I would say that not innovating is even more costlier. Why? Because while we are not innovating, we are staying in this state of a stationary state. stationary position while our competitors are out there and innovating and they're doing new things, they're doing things better, and we are in the same position. What happens 10 years along the line when they are continuing on their practice of innovating and we're just staying at this point in time, we're just staying in this state because we think that innovating is expensive. They will reach a position which we will be having a very difficult time to catch up to. That is the reality of it all. So, looking at that aspect, it is very important to understand how the competition might be viewing or using innovative practices to get ahead. It's not all about using the better equipment, using the better technology, using the better software, using the better hardware. It is much more than that. The next one is to have a competitive edge. This is the most simplest reason of it all. We we are here in this guest lecture today because we want to understand how we can be competitively challenged, how we can have a competitive edge over our competition, how we can do things better than our competition. Even if we do not own a company, it is in our best interest to know if you, at some point in time, we're always engaged in some organization or the other. It can be a for-profit, it can be a non-for-profit. The world revolves around competition. So it is in our best interest to understand how we can get a competitive edge by using innovation. So the next point is we need to study innovation because we want to iron out any misconceptions about innovation that we may have. I just said one earlier on that innovation needs to cost money. Well, it is not important that in order to innovate, we need to spend lots and lots of money. That is where the topic of micro innovation comes in. I have chosen this topic, micro innovation, specifically because this economy, this Nepalese economy that we are in, it demands micro innovation more than this general understanding of macro innovation that we have, like technological revolutions and creating new products that are, changing the industries that they are serving. It does not necessarily be, our understanding of innovation does not need to be limited to that. So apart from these, there are a lot of other misconceptions about innovation out there, and to iron these out, we need to understand, we need to learn about innovation. And the last one is to be well versed in the art of innovation, combining all of these points that came before you. There are different ways in which economies view innovation, identification of barriers and enablers of innovation, and understanding how the competition might be viewing innovative practices. All of these so that we can be well versed in the art of innovation. Because one thing that you will always be required to do in any sector that you're in is to improve. If you don't improve, then the people around you will, and they will get ahead and will get frustrated. So in order for that not to happen, so in order for us to not allow that to happen, we need to be well versed in the art of innovation. Now let's start with this topic of innovation. So there's a simple answer about innovation and there's a more complex answer. The simple answer, what is innovation? It is just a combination of three things. To make new things, to make things better, and then combining the two, which is to make new things that are better. This picture right here, okay, to make new things, this picture right here, I'm gonna ask you by show of hands, how many present here can tell me what this black thing is? Sunita ma'am, Prajwal sir, you're also, permitted to answer. What do you think this black thing is here, in between the table and the slab of meat? I was not expecting the right answer to come so fast. Okay, so Ashu Rokaya, she seems to have gotten the answer right off the bat. That's pretty impressive. So this here, this black board, If no one told me what this was, then unlike Ashu, I would have gotten the answer wrong and I would have said, yeah, that looks like a chopping board. But that is not a chopping board. As she just said, this is something that melts ice. Technically, it is the product is called a thawing board. To thaw means to defrost, right? So generally, we defrost the meat that we have and the frozen grocery items that we have using our microwave defrost options, right? But then this particular piece of hardware was not around a few years back. The first time I saw this was in my brother's restaurant. I was in the kitchen, and then one of the staff were using this backboard, and I asked him, "That's a peculiar-looking chopping board," and he said, "That's not a chopping board. That's a thawing board." And that's the first time I heard that word, thawing board. So the way that this product works is you put the frozen meat or frozen groceries or whatever onto this thawing board, leave it for 20 minutes to 30 minutes, and then the piece of meat or whatever you're trying to thaw out is going to get defrosted. No electricity required. You don't need to put it outside in the sun. It just works in normal room temperature, and it works faster than the slab of meat just placed outside in the room temperature. So if you leave it, so the product was demonstrated by putting a slab of meat outside on the table at room temperature and a slab of meat being placed on this thawing board, and it in fact thaws out that frozen item much quicker than the room temperature, than the one being placed in room temperature. So this is an example of making new things. Like, we had defrosting options, but then there are a lot of limitations. If you just happen to defrost it a bit more, happen to just set a time that is a bit more than is required, then the meat and the frozen item becomes ruined, and there are a lot of limitations. This particular item completely changed the game regarding the thawing out of frozen grocery items. So the next one is to make things better. This is obviously a barbecue grill, but this has double the functionality. Why? Because this has a compartment for making pizzas. Barbecue grills already existed, but the one that comes with having a pizza attachment, that is making things better. So these are two things: making new things and then making things better. The last one is combining the two, right? To making new things that are better. This is a very smart product that Ford makes for the cars that actually require this particular item. This is called the Ford My Key, MYKEY, My Key. So what the My Key allows the user to do is program the top speed of the car into the key. So the next time, if someone wants to borrow your car, if the next time a valet is required to park your car, if you give this key to the person who is borrowing your car, then this person will not be able to drive your car past the speed that you have programmed your car to go. A very useful product for car lovers or car enthusiasts or anyone who loves their cars, right? To making new things that are better. We all have keys, but we all now want this Ford My Key. We all wish that we had it. Everyone has a key not like this. So those are three things regarding innovation. That's the simplest definition: to make new things, to make things better, and to make new things that are better. But this guest lecture is based on academic research, and then I happen to have dedicated my thesis to micro innovation, and I have used these definitions that have been brought forth by scholars. So if nothing else, it is my responsibility to let you guys know on a bit of these academic definitions, because the simple part is not the thing that is that makes a thesis, right? It is these definitions that have been cited over and over and over again. I have to give credit to these researchers as well. So the definition that I'm going with here is by Schumpeter in 1950. This definition I've used because this is one of the most wholesome definitions of innovation out there. So it goes, innovation is the creation, development, and introduction of original products, procedures, systems, and structures of the organization. So do you get what this means? Innovation is not just, according to Computer at least, innovation is not just creating a new product. It is also creating new ways of making that product or service, new ways in which a service is delivered, new way in which a product is made. It is also the system, creating a new system in which this is made possible. We can make products, we can make new procedures, but innovation is also creating a new system through which all of this is possible. And at the end, it is also the structure of the organization itself. Traditionally, we had these, functional structures in our organizations where we have a person in charge, probably the CEO, right? And then a few chief executives like the CFO, CMO, etc., and then we have the branch managers, etc. So this traditional way of structuring our organizations have worked in the past, and it will continue to work in the future as well. But this is not the only way in which we can structure our organizations. There have been companies that are structuring their organizations completely differently. Like Spotify uses a completely unique way of structuring their organizations in such a way that they make these work groups, and these work groups are motivated to work together so that they don't need to answer to any managers. That is a completely revolutionary method of structuring the organization so that the organization can do much more, right? So furthermore, this definition also says that innovation is the exploration and utilization of new markets. Like, do you guys know that the actual reason behind creating these small sachets of shampoos, it is not just to make your travels easier. Like when I tend to travel, I tend to carry these small shampoo sachets because it's more convenient that way. That's obvious, right? But that is not the only reason why it was made. It was made because it has been acknowledged that not everyone can afford a 400 rupees shampoo bottle. So in order to serve a larger market, this particular is the same shampoo, it's just packaged in a different method, right? So basically what is happening is exploration and utilization of a new market. It's the same product, just by utilizing this particular aspect of venturing out into a new market. It is also the exploitation of new sources of supply of raw materials or partially manufactured products and manufactured products. Like for example, Apple, as you may know, the device that you're probably using, does not make its components. It gets its components from outside vendors because those vendors are more qualified than Apple to make those particular, items. The chips, the screens, the body, the cameras that is being assembled in the Apple phones. Lastly, the execution of new methods of combining resources for greater productivity. Right, we will get to that in just a bit. Now, we all know to some extent what innovation is, right? There's nothing completely new that we have talked about, but this particular aspect might be something completely new. We all know what technology is, and we all know what entrepreneurship is. So how do we define it when we put these two terms together, technology, entrepreneurship? Just a minute. So we all know what technology is, we all know what entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship is basically solving a problem that exists in society and maybe make money doing it. That is the easiest definition of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs solve problems. Entrepreneurs solve problems, and along the line they make money doing it. Social entrepreneurs solve social problems and then they make money doing it. Technology entrepreneurship can be defined just as simply, and it's just using either available or maybe not easily available technology, but regardless, using technology to solve problems and then make money doing it. So technology entrepreneurship, to defining it in a more academic manner, is the recognition, creation, and exploitation of opportunities through assembly of resources around a technological solution for the purpose of the development of a business venture. Right? So recognizing, creating, exploitation, exploring opportunities through the assembly of resources means the technology that we are using might already exist, right? Using particular technology to solve problems. The technology might already be here, and we're just using it to solve the problem. So basically what it means is technology entrepreneurship is not in fact that much more different from entrepreneurship as well. Entrepreneurship, the general sense of the word, entrepreneurship, right? The only difference is that technology entrepreneurship focuses a bit more on the technological aspect. When we use the word entrepreneurship, it usually refers to these business development and things like that. Technology entrepreneurship is just focusing a bit more on that technical aspect. That is the only difference. So technology entrepreneurs maneuver competitive advantage through one, the creation of technological possibilities, two, the capacity to use technological advancements to reduce operation and transaction cost, and the ability to use technologically superior products to address a market gap. So basically, using technology in such a way that they are solving the problems that exist in society by creating this, solving this particular market gap that exists. Just a minute, I'm just going to shut this window because I think there's a lot of noise coming from the background. Right? Sorry about that. So now let's start our discussion on micro innovation. There's a difference, as I said, between innovation and micro innovation. So we understand that innovation, when someone brings up this word called innovation, the thing that comes to mind is, revolutionary products, introducing robots in our manufacturing plants, and completely different versions of our phones. That is what comes to mind when we say innovation, and that is true. That is macro innovation. But what we are focusing right now is micro innovation, and the purpose. If you have missed it, I did mention it in the beginning of this lecture, but some of you did come a bit late. So the purpose of that, discussing about micro innovation, is because micro innovation is more suitable, more needed for industries that are trying to improve in this economy, in the Nepalese economy, and that is why we are focusing a bit more on the micro innovation standpoint. So micro innovation is basically adapting, modifying, or customizing existing technology or methods of operation. Incremental changes using technology. So macro innovation might be completely revolutionizing an industry, and micro innovation is taking incremental steps by actually modifying, customizing the existing technology or methods of operation. Realistically modifying a business model and improving products functionality. Like if you are using, if you're changing the way in which you're working in a particular office setting, like your office space might be pretty limited. It might only host like 5 to 6 people in a particular room. And if you are finding a way to save space and incorporate maybe double or triple more people inside that limited office space, then you're basically practicing micro innovation. Basically what you're doing is you're enhancing the method of operation using everything that is already available to you. So it's all about adapting, modifying, and customizing rather than creating something completely out of scratch, which is in fact micro innovation. So when we talk about micro innovation, products like these actually come to mind. This particular product, it's not a product, it's actually a feature that is starting to pick up in houses in the UK and the US. We all have this problem of finding extension cords, right? Just a minute. Welcome, Dia. I'm glad you're here. Let's start. So, uh, yeah. So we all have this problem of finding extension cords. I know for a fact that I suffer a lot with this problem. I always have devices that I need to use at a particular location, and I can't seem to reach the power outlet. Right? We all have this problem. So right now, there's this movement, and these sockets are pretty picking up pretty quickly. These extension cord sockets that are built inside the wall of homes, and you can just clip out the outer bit of these plugs, and then you can extend it to the device that needs to be that needs to be attached to the power outlet. So this is a very revolutionary thing. It has a very is very useful, and it has wide applications, and it makes us think, how is it that this has taken so long to be adapted? That is the thing that comes to mind. Like, my saying while understanding innovation and micro innovation is macro and micro, or just innovation. If the thing that you're seeing makes you go like, whoa, that's amazing, then that is considered to be innovation. That's innovation. If the thing that you're seeing, if it makes you if it makes you question how this has not always been how we do things, how has this not always been how we do the thing that we're currently doing, then that is micro innovation. If that is the question that comes to mind, then the product you're seeing or the service you're seeing is probably micro innovation. Like, look at this product right here. It is very useful, right? And it just makes us think that this particular product is very useful, and why have we taken this long to actually bring this into reality? Incremental changes. Wall sockets exist. We know that for a fact, right? We all have wall sockets in our homes, but we don't have this particular extension wall socket, do we? भर्खरै एकजनाको रिक्वेस्ट आएको थियो जस्तो लाग्यो. No, no matter. So yeah, it's the products that makes you think, how has this not always been how we do things? If the product makes you think that, if the service makes you think in that way, then that is how you distinguish micro innovation from macro innovation or innovation in general. So if it makes you go whoa, then that's innovation. If it makes you question how this has not always been how we do things, then that's micro innovation. Let's examine almost an hour up. So yeah, this I just love this slide. I just thought about it last night when I was being assaulted by mosquitoes, right? So the the mosquito repellent on the right side is the one that is being used in my parents' room right now. And this beauty on the left side, this beautiful technology on the left side, this mosquito repellent on the left side, is the one that I'm using in my room right now. So, but there's a very distinct difference between the two. If you don't have this in your home, then it might be confusing to you, but based on the design of this product, you already know what that difference is. Can please someone tell me what that difference is? You can unmute your microphones and tell me the answer. How is this product superior to this product? It does the same work. Yeah. So Dawar Hussein was the first one to answer. Thank you so much, Dawar. The difference is that the white one has a tiny fan on top. This particular section right here, there's a fan there, and it basically sends out the evaporated mosquito repellent vapor. And spreads it across the room, because inside the room when we are staying in it, during the evening and the nighttime, we tend to shut our doors and shut our windows, and there's no draft inside the room, right? So when the vapor comes out of this particular device, it tends to go just to the top of the room and to the top. But then this small adjustment to the already existing technology allows the vapor to be spread across the room just by incorporating a small fan. And by looking at this product, our mind immediately goes to questioning, how is this not how every mosquito vapor repellent is being made? So this is micro innovation. So we have heard the saying, the old, if it ain't broke, then don't fix it. We have heard this. सबैजनाले सुनेको छ के बिग्रा छैन भने किन बनाउनु? Like, I can't tell you the number of times I have recommended to bring some sort of change in the construction sites that I've visited. My father's friends, they have these construction firms, and I tend to visit them pretty often to see how things are being done, to see how competitors are using innovation, right? Just to assess the market. So I tend to go a lot. And every time I make a suggestion about improving some sort of the functionality that I see in these construction sites, 8 times out of 10, the in charge of that construction site or my father's friend, whoever it is there. They always say the same thing, which is, "Oily kam gori raza kina banaune?" If it's not broken right now, then it's just going to take a lot of work to fix it. It's actually a habit of being lazy. We don't want to do extra. Okay? If it's working right now, then we don't want to do something that is going to put us in a position that we have to do more work. Even though that's the reality or not. Time that's not necessary. Okay? We have this conception of believing that if it is not broken, then we don't need to fix it. But this is what happens when you fix it. The largest companies in the world are fixing it, and that is why they are the largest companies in the world. Walmart, this particular example is pretty fun. It's pretty funny and it's pretty fun. So basically what happened, this picture, what it's trying to tell you is that there was this big 2-step stool Walmart warehouses. These 2-step stools were being used in Walmart warehouses. The term used, I can't say used because they were more often not being used. They were being disregarded. It was there in every Walmart warehouses, but then they were being disregarded. They were not being used, and that completely defeats the purpose of the stool being there, right? The stool was kept there so that the people who are in the warehouses, the people who are loading and unloading the trucks, they can use these 2-step stools to have an easier time deloading the truck or loading the truck, unloading and loading the trucks. But it was not being used. Why? Because these stools were a bit heavy. And when it's heavy, and combine that with having to move that stool around a couple of 100 times, and employees were completely throwing out their bags by just moving that stool around. And that is why the stool was not being used. So these 2 gentlemen right here, who are the warehouse managers, they just experimented with using a smaller stool, just a 1-step stool, which was half the weight, but it's obviously like half the height, right? It's not that tall, but then it's pretty light. And what they found out was fascinating. Everyone started using the stools. All they required was a stool that was light enough, and they just changed the larger stool to a smaller stool, and then productivity went up. It went so high that they saved $30 million by just putting in a new step stool. Do you see how much of an impact micro innovation can have? It is just enhancing the way that things are being done. It's nothing new. It's just replacing one stool with another stool. It looks like it's going backwards, right? Replacing a 2-step stool with a 1-step stool. But then in this particular context, it was revolutionary for this particular company, Walmart. So they saved $30 million by just replacing a two-step stool with a one-step stool. Now, can you possibly imagine if we practice this, approach of constantly wanting to improve our workplaces, how much money we could in fact save? This is why micro innovation is important. We have already identified what micro innovation is, right? We already know what it means. So this is the consequence. This is the result of what happens when we take it seriously. Companies like Walmart are one of the biggest companies in the world because they are incorporating things like this, incorporating micro innovation aspects. Now, so far, this is like a summary section of the presentation. We have reached somewhere midway of our guest lecture. So, the thing that we have learned so far is we have this general understanding of innovation, right? Innovation is creating new things, creating things that are better, and then combining the two, we have creating new things that are better, right? Now, if we want to incorporate micro innovation, the idea is to use technology entrepreneurship to make things better and to incorporate micro innovation into our organization. We know what micro innovation is. We know what technology entrepreneurship is. Innovation gives rise to technology entrepreneurship, which is basically using technology to solve problems and maybe make money doing it. That is technology entrepreneurship. And micro innovation is basically solving problems on a micro scale, innovating in a micro scale, improving the functionality of products, improving the way we do things in a smaller scale. But just because it's in a smaller scale does not mean that the impact that these small changes have is going to be small. Just the example of Walmart. Small change on a very small scale, but then the impact was high. So this is where we are moving forward. This is our understanding of micro innovation. So I'm just going to, ask Sunita ma'am and uh, Nirad sir, if the recording is going smoothly. Is everything okay, Sunita ma'am?
Looks like it is, Trishik, but for the recording, I think we'll have a meeting after this meeting, and then we will talk we'll talk about what has been done. You can
It's
continue.
on, actually. Yeah, Nirad sir told me that during the halfway we're gonna check up on how it's going on it
Yeah,
and remind again.
sure.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so moving forward, actually, is there any question up to this point? Because now we're moving forward towards the construction industry and examples regarding the examples of the construction industry. So up to this point, if there's any question that anyone wants to ask me, then this is the right time to do it.
Trishik, I have one comment or questions. And do you have? I was trying to ask a relevant examples in Nepalese context for micro innovation, but I think you're going to cover this in next session, right?
Yes,
Where you will be covering the construction industry.
exactly.
Right, right. Okay. And you'll also be covering your dissertation experience and findings. Okay. Great. Go ahead.
So apart from Sunita ma'am, does anyone have any questions regarding the topic that we have just discussed? Everything that has been discussed so far.
Just a small query, Trishik. Very nice presentation till now. Uh, just are you covering later or it is not covered? Just people, how do they develop this kind of innovation mindset, micro innovation mindset? Is it
Yes, sir.
inborn or is it, can it be developed that kind of habit or does it need practice? Because we
Definitely.
have clearly seen the benefits of doing it, but how do people actually realize the outcome?
Exactly. So the part three of our presentation, the part three of today's guest lecture, is all about addressing the how can we. So
Okay.
everything that we need to know about how to develop this mindset, how to develop our organizations, so we can in fact incorporate micro innovation practices. So that is where we're going to leave.
Oh, okay, okay. If you great, thank you.
Okay. So am I sharing my screen? Yeah.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Uh,
Like,
yes.
can I know like we like हुन्छ नि हामीले इनोभेसनको लाइक प्रोसेसहरू त फरवर्ड गर्छौँ तर लाइक where do like innovation program go wrong भन्ने चाहिँ क्या लाइक आफ्टर अल हामीले चाहिँ अहिलेसम्म लाइक हाउ क्यान वी इनोभेट समथिङ होइन लाइक कसरी सक्सेसफुल हुने गर्न सक्सेसफुल भइन्छ इनोभेट गरेर त्यो चाहिँ हामीले सिकिरहेको छौँ तर लाइक कस्तो कस्तो पोइन्ट हुन्छ लाइक वेयर क्यान वी गो रङ विथ द इनोभेसन
Where can we go wrong with innovation?
यस
So yeah, that is also going to be addressed in the how can we section. Right? How can we develop our organizations, and what are the barriers, what are the pitfalls where we can go wrong? But earlier, a glimpse matre diya also, eh, Vrisham? So where we're going to discuss about that one. Right? So the barriers to innovate, this is where we can go wrong. All of these points are still yet to be discussed. Right? So this is all in the how can we make our companies more innovative, micro and macro. You know, it's not going to be smooth sailing, mind you. It's going to be a very rough, step because when you're starting out, especially when you're talking about innovation, innovation is never efficient. Okay? Saying that we are going to innovate efficiently, that sentence completely does not exist. So there are going to be pitfalls. There are places where you might go wrong. And the only thing we can do is to identify these barriers, these limitations to where we might go wrong, and then try to identify enablers so we can move past these limitations, move past where we might go wrong. So two section to completely Bakinisa, we're going to address that. So this particular, if you have questions, then please follow up thing, alright? And we will answer that.
Sure, thank you.
Now, construction industry. I have acknowledged the fact that a lot of the participants today don't have anything to do with the construction industry, so I've tried to make it as simple as possible, and as I will try to explain it as briefly as possible. So, completely disregarding all of the technical details and company not moving into all of that, the boring stuff. The thing that you need to understand regarding the construction industry, or more specifically the tender contract based construction industry, is that it revolves around the principle of efficiency and effectiveness. All of my students that I have taught management to, this particular slide is going to be very relevant because this is the slide that we started our management discussion with. For everyone else, this is what I would like to compare the tender contract based construction industry on two terms, one principle of efficiency and effectiveness. So basically what happens is you have a bidding war with other companies, right? You bid a certain amount. There's a contract that is available to every construction company that qualifies, and then you bid an amount, you claim that you will be able to you complete that contract in a certain amount, and if the customer likes it, then that contract is offered to you, and your responsibility is to complete that contract effectively. That is where effectiveness comes in. In this industry, being effective means you are completely satisfying everything that you need to satisfy based on that contract. So that is where the effectiveness comes in. The efficiency comes in for you. How do you make money in the construction industry? That is answered by the term efficiency. If you are efficient in the construction industry, then you tend to make money. If you have a lot of wastage, if you're using more raw materials than you have to use, if you're using more labor, manpower than you have to use, if you're using more time than you have to use, then what is possible? Then you tend to lose money. Then you tend to bleed money, actually. It is very difficult to make money in construction industries. A lot of companies have tried and failed, and you can try and try and try, but there will always be some projects where you will in fact lose money, and the reason is always the same, because you are lacking efficiency, right? So just for the basic general understanding of the construction industry, specifically the tender contract based construction industry, it revolves around the principle of efficiency versus effectiveness. Efficiency by limiting your resource usage, by limiting your waste, by lowering your waste, and by maximizing goal attainment, that is in fact effectiveness. So this principle is all that you need right now to understand how the construction industry, you know, functions. And I hope this is actually a very clear understanding to how the construction industry looks like. So the way you make money inside the construction industry is in fact by becoming efficient. The more efficient you can be inside the industry by operating a construction company inside a project, the more money you will save and the more profit you will make. Right? So for you to become efficient, for you to become more efficient than your competitors, you don't necessarily need to have a lot of high-tech, expensive machinery items. This is like one of the misconceptions that a lot of construction companies tend to have. We tend to say that yeah, हामीले कसरी चाहिँ यो ठुलो कम्पनी जसरी काम गर्न सक्ने, हामीसँग त्यो सामानै छैन, हामीसँग त्यो इक्विपमेन्ट नै छैन. That is the reasoning that I often hear people make when we are comparing construction companies. But that is not in fact the case. Like even before we had these giant concrete pumps and these giant cranes to transport things around, we were still making money in construction industry. It was not dependent on how much advancement we brought forth. The thing that we're doing in the past, we're still doing it, but these technology does make things easier. I'm not saying that technology is not important or these machinery items or these concrete pumps or these cranes are not important. I'm just saying that the depending element, these machinery items are not the only thing that makes you efficient. There's much more than that. You need to plan accordingly. You need to have a formal interaction with your project manager in order to use the limited amount of resources and use the resources at a particular time. Everything needs to fit together for you to be efficient in this industry. So regarding the introduction of the construction industry for this audience, the number of people that we have today, I think this much is sufficient. More than this will start to get a bit boring. I don't want that. So now let's have a segment called Have You Seen These in Nepal? I know for a fact that a lot of you might not be involved in the construction industry, in the construction sector. And that's fine. But at some point in time, you might have stumbled on to a construction site, or you might have a relative's house that is being constructed and you might have been there, or your house might be under construction or being renovated or something like that. So you will probably have seen a few of these tools and equipments, at some point in time. So the first topic is rebar tying. I'm really focusing on trying not to make these topics boring. So if I need to talk about the construction industry and the construction specifications, technical terms, then I'm going to keep it as brief as possible. So the first is rebar tying. Now, this term called rebar tying is basically a practice of. So you have these rebars, as you can see in this picture, right? So you have these rebars, and you have to connect them in such a way that it will be able to take the load of the concrete being poured onto it. So that's the general practice. So there are a few different ways of doing this. The basic thing that we are seeing in Nepal is this picture right here. We are tying rebars using these traditional bending wires, right? Even in large construction sites and these modern construction sites, you will still see these bending wires being used. Possibly if the construction company is large enough or they can afford to have better machinery items, then they're probably using these drill type machines in order to tie these rebars together. There's this machine called Rebar Tying tool, and they use it to just have the rebar ties, bending wires in place. If that's not the case, then the manual laborers are completely using their hands to tie the rebars, and that is a very time-consuming method of doing it. Right? Using the tool, it's just, if you can afford it, then that's fine. If you can't, then you have to use hand. So there's a new way of doing this, which has been used a lot, especially in the US and parts in the UK as well. I have just seen this once in Nepal, and I had just made a suggestion to a friend of my father's to just have this imported and then try it out. At first, they were having a bit of complication because they didn't have the necessary skilled manpower to just do this efficiently. But after a few months, like 3 or 4 months, they were completely shocked by how much of a difference this particular tool makes. And now they are using it as much as possible because it saves time and it saves money. Probably, I mean, while you're importing these new items from outside, since you can't make it here, initially at least, you need to spend a bit more, right? But then the fact that if you tie rebar by hand, it takes a few weeks. And if you do this by using these rebar support chairs, then it takes a matter of hours or just a few days. Like the fact that time saving alone is worth investing in things like these. And these are just like small plastic bits. It does not cost a lot. This just came out of this ingenious solution just came out of a whim by a certain the name of that person I completely forgot. But then this was just out of necessity. They were completely tired of tying these rebars by hand using these bending wires because the gloves were being punctured, and there are a lot of limitations in using wires, right? I need to be pretty careful while saying this because these support chairs don't have like limitless applications. There will be like vertical tying, requirements in which these particular tying support chairs will not be used. So in other places like these flat areas right here in this particular picture, these can be replaced by these support chairs. So this is also an example of micro innovation specifically being used in the construction industry. I had recently tried this out in a private project right here in Balaji. It was a private project, but it was like it was a friend, let's say a family friend, and it was the appropriate time to experiment using this. I didn't use it in the entire project, just the ground surface concreting portion, and it worked flawlessly. So, and the thing about these small support chairs is that if you know how to make it, then it's very easy to make these right here in Nepal. It's not a very complicated tool to use. It's not a very complicated tool to manufacture. So this is regarding the rebar ties, right? So moving on, bricklaying, we all know what it is, right? The process of laying bricks and joining it using concrete. So if you have ever visited a construction site, if you have ever stumbled onto a construction site, you've probably seen few of these tools being used, right? You see a wooden float, which is used to completely smoothen out the surface of the concrete. We use the right angle scale. We use the plumb bob to ensure that the walls are being constructed according in the right angle. So we see these traditional tools being used. Now, there's nothing wrong with these tools being used, and to some extent, we will continue to use these tools along the line as well. But then there's this new trend in bricklaying that we have yet to incorporate. I have never seen these tools being used here. I've seen this particular tool being used once, and then that's it. Right? I'm trying to import, these tools right now as we speak, but then these tools are yet to be, widely used in construction industry in Nepal. If you have seen these tools being used somewhere in Nepal, then do let me know. I would really like to visit that construction site. Anyway, so this is the traditional way of doing it, right? So what this particular tool or these two particular tools allows the bricklayer to do is it's a very cheap plastic spring that is attached to the brick, and then the string goes along the perpendicular section of these clamps, and it basically does what all of these tools combined will allow the bricklayer to do. But it basically ensures that the brick is being laid at the needed position where the brick needs to be laid. And this particular tool just allows the bricklayer to pour the right amount of concrete onto the wall so that excess, not a lot of concrete is being wasted, not a lot of concrete is being, splattered around in unnecessary areas. So it saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of money, it saves a lot of resource, and that's how you actually make money in the construction industry. So the tools that I've shown you just now are very inexpensive. It's just a matter of taking that step forward into wanting to innovate, into wanting to do things slightly better. This is what happens when you do things just slightly better in the construction industry. You save a lot of money. And the last one is formwork. So the term formwork is basically creating a structure so that you can give the concrete that is being poured a particular form. So if you want a concrete to be poured in the shape of a wall, so the formwork is structured in the shape of a wall, and in between those two sections, the concrete is poured. And after a few days, when the concrete has dried up, the formwork is released, and that concrete stays up in that wall shape. That is basically the purpose of formwork. There are basically three types of formwork: steel, timber, and aluminum. They have their distinct uses. Some construction sites, based on the climate, based on the weather conditions, based on a lot of different factors, based on the capital factors, they require timber. Either they require aluminum, or they might require steel formwork designs. So these are the traditional ways in which formwork has been made, has been used. So this right picture, I don't know about you, but every time I look at that picture, it just feels like home. It feels like I'm back home. It feels homely. I don't know if it makes you feel like that, but maybe because I've seen this growing up and this is pretty familiar to me. But just look at how this formwork is being made. I mean, being put up. They're basically wooden poles being balanced on bricks and stones and praying to God that it doesn't fall off. That is not how you're supposed to do work, right? But then obviously, like, these small construction projects are limited by cost, and then the contractors have no option then to use the cheapest options available. But then, as we have already discussed, not all solutions have to be expensive. But in this particular aspect, this poor contractor probably used this because they did not have capital, to spare whatsoever. I don't know why, but this just feels like home. Anyway, so the revolution in modern decking system. Now this is where things start to get just a little bit expensive in the short run, but it's still cheaper in the long run. This is the modern decking system. Now look at how different these two pictures are. So basically, the modern decking system allows you to use like already made panels. These panels have already a fixed shape and size. All you have to do is you have to put them up and balance them, or hold them up using these props that we call steel props. So one or two people can just set up an entire floor of formwork in a matter of hours. As well, compared to what is being used in this picture, this takes like just the amount of formwork being used in this picture right here. This takes at least 2 days to do it. If we were using modern decking system, then this could have been done in a matter of hours, maybe 2 hours to say the most. This is what it looks like close up, the modern decking system. So the practice is pretty much the same. It is just a reinforcement. I don't think I can call it a reinforcement. Basically, a structure that is put forward so that the concrete that is being poured can take its shape while the drying process. So the same principle is just completely different ways of doing it. Now, I have bashed on the Nepalese construction industry a lot, but then I have to say that things are in fact getting better. Construction companies are in fact innovating. They are doing things better. This is the construction site of the Federal Parliament building being constructed at Darbar Marg. and they seem to be using this particular decking system for their formworks and other tools that have been brought to my attention. I have not been able to go visit this site on my own personally because of this COVID situation. They have these very strict health and safety rules, so I haven't been able to visit this particular site. But then they are doing things completely differently, and this is a very good sight to see. These decking systems that is being used. So I mean, things are getting better, but then while we are still adapting with, adapting with these basic improvements, the construction industry outside of Nepal, is completely taking new heights. They're doing completely revolutionary things, and we will still be left behind. So it is time to pick up the pace, right? So now we're going to talk about some of these proactive innovation and some of these reactive innovations. The proactive innovations are all from outside. These are the cases that I have mentioned in my thesis as well. These are the cases that I based my thesis on. So the difference is that these international cases, these engineering marvels, are a result of proactive innovation. So there's a difference between proactive and reactive innovations. Proactive innovation is when someone wants to do something completely new, when they want to improve and they find new ways of doing it, they find new tools to doing it. And if the tools and the ways are not available, then they combine what is possible to make things happen. That is proactive solution. This is what happens outside, right? The first case, the Edge office building. This is the office building of Deloitte in Amsterdam, Netherlands. This is the most sustainable, energy positive office building in the world. Did you just hear the word that I used? Energy positive. Do you know what that means? That means that this office makes more energy than it uses. Do you even know what offices like that can do in the future? Like, we are facing these global crises, these global warming crises. I mean, not considering the amount of money it would cost to make a building like that, not considering that, and just focusing on the positive implications of this building. This office building is energy positive. The south-facing facade, the south-facing glass facade, is covered with solar panels, and this particular south-facing glass facade makes more energy than the building requires to charging its phones, to charging its electric vehicles, to lighting its offices, to use everything, to power its generators, everything. It generates more energy than is required, and the rest is stored as backup. Even the rain that falls in the compound of this office building is recirculated into watering its plants and wherever it is required. So this is what happens when we see proactive solutions to problems. So this is the second case is where we see some more relatable approaches to innovation. The New Karolinska Hospital in Solna, Sweden it's a very particular case study because it was facing a lot of scrutiny and it was required to be constructed while not disrupting the operation of the already existing Karolinska Hospital. So it had to be constructed with minimum noise. It had to be constructed very efficiently without disturbing anything that the new hospital was surrounding. And they did this, they pulled it off by incorporating BIM, which we call it building information modeling in construction. So using building information modeling, BIM 360 to be exact, that is the exact BIM model that they used. So using that BIM, what they did was they circulated every raw material, every manpower, every communication through that BIM software, and they constructed this New Karolinska Hospital in the. This is considered to be one of the most efficient construction projects out there. So even during its operation, the BIM is still active, and everything that happens in the New Karolinska Hospital is monitored through this BIM. So this particular hospital is one of the benchmarks when we talk about BIM. Like we are using BIM in our projects here as well, but then that is nowhere large enough to the BIM that is being used outside. So BIM is basically the building information modeling software which we use to track our supplies, track our expenses, track our raw materials, inventory, stocks, everything. We use that software to make sure that the construction project is going smoothly. We generally use it in the larger projects, but now we are starting to incorporate that in the smaller projects as well. So there are ranges. Not all BIM softwares are created the same. So this is the second one. I would discuss about the cases in a bit lengthier fashion, but we just have like half an hour left, and we still have these question answer rounds. So I'm just moving along a bit quicker than I had originally planned. Now, this is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting cases that I explored in my thesis, which is the Muladi construction system in Tanzania, East Africa. So the practice here, the picture that you see before you, these engineers, these contractors, these workers are basically installing a sort of a formwork, like prefab structures, plastic structures, and they are creating these structures first, hollow structures, and then they are pouring the concrete and making like these ready-made houses. They're just pouring the concrete and the rebar, and they are making these houses in a couple of days. They are making one house every 2 days using this Muladi construction system. This system was created out of necessity because they were, the projects in Tanzania were required to build a lot of houses in a very short amount of time with a very limited capital, and that is what gave rise to this Muladi construction system. First creating a hollow structure, then pouring concrete and rebar into it, and then creating this end result. This just takes 6 or 7 workers a day or two to make, excluding the time that the concrete takes to dry. So this is, the approach towards innovation that is that we can see outside of Nepal. This is the proactive solution. Now, moving on to the local cases. This is something that we did in our construction sites, more particularly, more intensively in one of our local construction sites right here in Kathmandu. So there was a case, there was a project where we had to finish the ground surfaces, the basement level surfaces, during the harshest times of the monsoon season. And adding to our good luck, the soil that we were dealing with happened to be one of the worst soils that a contractor can ask for. So it was very muddy and the working conditions were not appropriate. People were going into the construction site and then leaving out covered with mud, and it was not a very good sight to see. So the solution that we used was a modified dewatering process. So dewatering is a term that every contractor knows and every engineer knows, where you're basically pumping out the excess water that you don't require from the construction site or from wherever it needs to be pumped from. So the challenge was we had to perform this dewatering in a condition where the submersible pump could not function for more than an hour. You put the submersible pump in these muddy waters for more than an hour and you need to buy another pump. So that was the challenge that we faced. So the solution that was brought forth, I wish I had a picture to show you, but then even if I had a picture of this modified dewatering pump, it would be a one that was covered in mud and it would not make sense. So the thing that we did was we get these submersible pumps and we covered these submersible pumps in meshes and wicker baskets and then another mesh on top. So basically only the clean water was making its way into the submersible pump and the soil was, just left behind. And after a few hours of drying in the sun, the soil completely became compacted, and then we could carry on our working processes. So that was a reactive solution to what was a very intense problem that we were facing. And now, because of that, every time we face a similar problem, we have the same approach of the water, modifying that submersible pump, and we are getting better and better and better regarding this modification process so that we can perform this dewatering in very difficult situations as well. The second one is wiring structure changes to accommodate repairs. So there was a particular construction site. I can't tell you exactly which construction site because of reasons, but it was one of the largest ones that we took up. And the customer was not a very cooperative customer, right? We were facing a lot of problems regarding the finishing of the wiring structures. So we were facing a lot of delays because the customer was asking us to completely redo what we had done, and the customer wanted to make repairs as easily as possible after the construction construction phase was completed, after the handover phase was completed. So what we did out of frustration, this was more of a solving problem out of frustration, was that we completely reinforced every false ceiling that we installed in that particular building, so that the repairs could be done in such a manner that the person doing the repairs could completely fit into the false ceiling and get it done in a matter of, well, how long. That depends on the qualification of the person doing the repairs. So we basically reinforced these false ceiling panels so that we did not have to completely redo the panels every time we did the repairs. So this was another innovation, reactive innovation, that stemmed out of, in this case, frustration, but then out of necessity. Now we have moved on to the final section of our guest lecture, which is how to incorporate technology, entrepreneurship, and micro-innovation practices. Now this is where we start to answer Prajwal sir's questions. We know what the terms are, right? We know what innovation is, we know what technology entrepreneurship is, and we know what micro-innovation is. We know how innovation is being, how construction companies outside of Nepal are incorporating innovation. We know for a fact how construction companies in Nepal are, practicing innovation. But how to incorporate innovation and technology entrepreneurship and micro innovation in any, business setting or in any company that you're probably engaged with. So there are a few common elements that we need to identify first. So this is basically from the World Economic Forum, and these are essentially success factors. 335. So these are basically success factors, and it was brought forth by the World Economic Forum. And it says that in order to be successful in terms of incorporating innovative practices, these are the things that you need to first start off with. These are the things that you need to have in your organizations. The first one is develop a vision and instill and innovate. And there's a small error here. Develop a vision and instill an innovation culture that challenges the construction industry's status quo. Just remove this construction and just add in your industry of choice, and you're basically left with the same solution. So developing a vision and instill innovation culture that challenges the construction industry or any industry status quo. Like, you can hire a number of people and then pay them to work for you, but then they will be only working for the money, right? That is how most of the companies are set up. But then when you establish a company and then you have this innovation culture of constantly motivating your employees to do better, constantly challenging them to challenge themselves, then basically what you're doing is you're creating a culture where employees are not hesitant to make things better, are not hesitant to work in a way that improves functionality, in a way that improves productivity. That's the first point. The second one is create talented and multidisciplinary teams and devise an agile organization to accelerate innovation. So flexibility is key. In this world, in this turbulent, just look at how we're doing things, this guest lecture. This is a result of flexibility. Like if this pandemic had hit us 5 or 7 years before today, then this virtual online guest lecture session might not have been possible. We would probably use Skype, but then who uses Skype, right? So it might not have been possible. So it is a very good idea to explore your options and be flexible and have an organization that will be able to be flexible when the time needs it to be. The next one is take a customer-centric approach to devising innovation, starting from the pain points of the customer, clients, and assess and asset end user. Like you can have an innovative product, you can have an innovative service, but as long as it does not satisfy any needs, as long as it does not, as long as it's not, concentrated around the pain points of your clients, then you're just plain stupid. Because you can do things that no one else is doing, right? You can do revolutionary, unique things that no one else is doing, but if it does not have value, then what is the point of that innovation? So this particular point says that it addresses that issue of having the innovation circle around the pain points of the clients. Have innovations that actually matter. Do things better in order to make functionality, in order to improve your work functions, so that it helps the end user, so that it helps your clients. The fourth one is establish product platforms rather than taking individual project perspective to create the business case for innovation. So product platforms are basically the common elements between products or services. The best way to explain this is, let's say you have a factory that makes junk food, right? You might have chips or cheese balls and instant noodles and things like that. The raw materials that you're using, the equipment that you're using, the machinery that you're using, the real estate that you're using, building that you're using, those are the common elements, and those are the product platforms. The raw materials, the resources that you're using, which is common in different products, those are the product platforms. Even in construction, I just told you the example of how we are using that particular solution of modifying the submersible pump, and how we are now, if we face that issue of having difficulty in dewatering, we use that solution in every construction site that we have. So that is establishing a product platform rather than taking individual project perspectives. Not just solving problems and then forgetting about it. So we have problems in construction sites, we have problems in creating products, we have problems in getting a particular service out there, right? But if you have this approach of identifying these product platforms, these service platforms, and identifying the common elements that will assist you in solving problems, and that's going to be much better than to have an individualistic approach. The next one is develop a pilot project and prototypes to demonstrate the potential of and provide proof of value. This is important because, especially in construction industry, you can't just do new things and cross your fingers and hope it works, because the consequences are pretty catastrophic, to say the least. So if it fails, then it fails in a monumental fashion. So there needs to be trials before you actually put it into practice. Nurture the broader ecosystem necessary for implementing the innovation by developing a local supply chain and partnerships. This example is perfectly suited for the thing that I'm doing right now, which is there's this construction site in Birganj that I am staying in Kathmandu and I'm monitoring right now. So everything that we are using, there was an option to either take all the raw materials and manpower from Kathmandu to Birganj and then have it made there. And then the other option was to use everything that was available in Birganj itself and then have it made the structure. I mean, so we chose the latter option because according to the contract, according to our client, they wanted to enhance the economy of Birgunj as far as possible. So they asked us personally to try to incorporate as much of Birgunj's raw materials and manpower and resources as possible. So this is applicable even in innovation itself. Try to enhance the local supply chain. I told you regarding the, you know, rebar chair, right? The thing that replaces the rebar ties. So you can make that here in Nepal itself. It's not a very complex design. All it needs to do is grab hold of these rebars and not let go of it until the pouring of concrete and drying of the concrete process is done with. That's all that the product needs to do, and that is very easy to do it here. You don't necessarily need to import it from outside. So that is what it means to develop the local supply chain and partnerships. Embracing business model innovation alongside technological innovation in engineering and construction. So innovation does not necessarily be needed to be limited in engineering and the technological aspects only. It can be incorporated in the business aspects as well. Like the thing that we're constantly improving is our method of storing inventory, method of communicating with our suppliers, method of tracking our finances, method of basically everything that we do in our corporate offices, along with enhancing the construction side as well. So embracing the business model innovation side along with the technological side. Advocate new ways of contracting to enable and incentivize effective collaboration between projects owners from the start. Making sure that you have this communication with your clients, saying that okay, so we want to do things as well as possible and we will try to enhance things as we go along. Are you going to be on board with our decision to continuously improve our operations and continuously asking the project owners to be involved? Because if you don't ask your project owners to be involved, then there's going to be I'm saying this out of experience. If you try to do something new and good, if you try to improve something and you don't keep your clients in the loop, when they come in and find that the contract, what they are imagining in their head is not being executed, then they're going to have a sense of disbelief and there's going to be conflicts following that interaction. So it is always a good idea to collaborate with the project owners and ask them to be involved in the innovation process from the very beginning. And the last one is shaping the regulatory environment proactively to enable and promote adoption of innovation. This point is pretty simple. So we have like 5 to 10 minutes before I can finish this up. Then we can move forward with the question and answers. So the next step towards identifying how we can innovate, how we can incorporate these micro innovation and technology entrepreneurship practices in our offices, in our construction sites, in our methods of operations. These are what pushes the innovation forward. Clients or contractors, which is the demand pull and capacity push, technology push. If we have the required technology available, then we will do things according to that, according to what the technology allows us to do. Third one is increase performance and productivity, which is cost saving, desired duration, improve quality, improve efficiency of the firm. You want to do things better because you want to improve the efficiency of your firm. Desire to improve the firm's reputation, that is simple enough. Competitive advantage, competition, end user requirements, innovation brokers. Now these are the parties that join the end user of the technology and the manufacturer of the technology. So in my case, if I want to use this new concrete pump that is available in the market, and if I believe that this concrete pump is going to enhance the operation, then the dealer that I buy it from in Nepal acts as the innovation broker, and the maker of this revolutionary concrete pump, that is the manufacturer. So the broker is the person that links these two parties together. The innovation leaders or champions. So I act as the innovation champion or innovation leader in my firm because I'm constantly working to improve the functionality, not just in the technical side of our construction sites, but also in the corporate offices that we have. I want to make things better every step along the way, and that is what an innovation leader, innovation champion does. You don't have to be innovation leader and innovation champion sometimes are different people. They don't necessarily have to be the same person. But sometimes, yeah, if they are well versed in the art of innovation, if they're well versed in, knowing what to do that is going to be better for the organization, then these two roles might be overlooked by the same individuals. Then we have suppliers, head contractor requirements, obviously easy work processes, improved ability to attract new employees, regulation standards in government, manufacturing firms, procurement systems. These are pretty easy to understand. And the last one is knowledge exchange, stimulation of research, creation of knowledge and networks. So this acts as a driver because in most cases, what is happening in the construction industry, as far as I have experienced, is that a lot of the parties, a lot of the smaller construction firms, they don't know what the best practice of construction actually is, because I happen to have done my thesis on micro innovation in construction industries, and I happen to know the best practices that are being used. But then these information is not widely available. So what we have here in Nepal is FCAN, that is the Federation of Contractors Association of Nepal. So this particular entity, the responsibility of this entity is to have frequent training programs to train the contractors that are part of FCAN, to revolutionize this particular Nepalese construction industries, to train contractors, to have a communication medium between the contractors and things like that. So that is the role of entities like FCAN. So we have barriers to innovation. Now we have a lot of barriers to innovation. There might be drivers, but then there are more barriers to innovation than there are drivers to innovation. And I believe someone asked me earlier that we might have some pitfalls while dealing with innovation. We might have some difficulties in wanting to innovate. So this is where we discuss all of those elements. So the first one, I'm not going to discuss all of these in detail because one thing, we don't have a lot of time and not all of these are very complex. So I'm going to select a few, which here I have put in bold. So those are the things that are going to be discussed. So barriers to innovate. The first one is lack of technical capability. The second one is long payback period. So the thing that I want to discuss here is long payback period. What generally happens while we want to innovate is that we tend to think about the initial cost of having to innovate. Like for the to take an example, the example we took for the formwork, like the decking system. Buying that decking system might cost a bit more than having to buy the traditional formwork systems, the formwork tools, right? So contractors fail to identify the long-term benefit that these new technologies, like these new equipments that can be used to do things, might have. So due to these long payback periods, and keep in mind that the construction industry, these projects go on for years and years, and the only way to make money is to use these expensive decking systems or these expensive, innovative, efficient tools in as many construction sites, in as many projects as possible. So the only way to do that is to make use of it continuously. So if we fail to do that, if contractors fail to see the long-term benefit, then this acts as a barrier to innovation. Then we have lack of recognition of the value of the innovation, and then risk of failing. We all have risk of failing. What happens if we spend money to innovate? What happens when we try to do things just a bit more differently, but then it ends up failing? There is always a risk, and there's nothing that we can do about it. I mean, the risk will always be there. The only outcome we have has already been discussed, which is having a trial period, trying it out on a smaller scale so the negative impacts can be mitigated, so the negative impacts can be controlled, right? Because anything that you do, it will always have risk, and especially in the construction industry, you will always have risk. Even though you're doing things that you have been doing for the past decade or more, even if you repeat the same operation for the 105th time, there will always be a risk of failure. So why not have that risk all the while trying to improve your operation, right? So the next one is contracting issues. Contracting strategies resulting in a fragmented and disjoint design and construction process. Choice of firms based on low bids. Now this is actually a very big problem because the way that the construction industry is set up here, it's obviously the lowest bidder gets the contract, right? And when you are selecting the bidder that is bidding the lowest amount, there is minimum room for spending money in improving. Basically, what you are doing by bidding as low as possible is you're doing the thing that you know will work so that there will be minimum risk, and basically you're not leaving room for improvement. You're basically doing what is tried and tested and what has been perfected, if that even exists. So this is where the system sort of breaks down. Like, if things were a bit different, then obviously more firms would have the incentive to innovate. But as things are, since we choose the firms based on low bids, this also acts as a barrier to innovate. A few simple things that are following: industry regulations and codes, lack of government as role models, inappropriate legislations, regulations, and standards, poor lack of communication, and the thing that needs discussion is characteristics of the construction industry: project-based nature, price-based competition. Just an add-on to what I just said, based on low bids, right? We select the companies that have the lowest bidding amount. We give the contracts to the companies that will do our project in the minimum amount. So if there is a very strict price-based competition, if you want to minimize the price, then this actually acts as a hindrance to innovate. But then we have already established that sometimes it is very cost effective to actually incorporate micro innovation. So it's not necessary that even though you're facing a price-based competition, you're completely forced to do things as things have already in already established manners. Like the example that we gave regarding the bricklaying and rebar tying, those are things that are inexpensive. They cost exactly as much as rebar tying as you're using the rebar reinforcing chairs, right? All that is required is that it has to be pre-tested, and you need to make sure that it actually works in an actual working setting. So price-based competition is actually a very good point when it comes to barriers to innovate, but then this impacts more on the macro innovation side and less on the micro innovation side. This is why we're focusing more on micro innovation in this particular guest lecture. The main reason is because in the context of Nepal, the thing, we can't change a few things, right? We can't change the nature of the industry, right? Like in a few months or in a few years. We can't change the fact that companies or clients will always choose companies based on low bids. We can't change these few factors. So what we can do is incorporate more of the micro innovation aspects, which costs less but has equally more benefits. Like we gave the example of Walmart just introducing a slightly different stool, right? It didn't cost them anything, but it had positive impacts that were huge. So that is what we need to focus on. The next one is economic conditions, availability of financial resources, financial restrictions, resistance, technological and employee resistance risk, tight organization controls that hampers pursuit of radical innovation, political conditions, firms' innovation strategy. This again needs discussion because construction firms in general, they lack innovation strategies. They have strategies of and then what the next project is going to be like, where the next project might come from, how to get as many projects as possible, how to make profit out of these projects. But then it is very unfortunate to bring to light that we don't have these innovation strategies in industries that actually need them. We don't have strategies that deal with how can we do things slightly better every month or in every project that follows so that we can become more and more efficient. That is never a topic of discussion. Like this is, I'm saying this out of experience. I mean, there might be companies in Nepal or in Kathmandu operating in Kathmandu there, they might have these innovation strategies. And I'm pretty sure that the companies that are working in Kathmandu, a few of them have innovation strategies. I had the good fortune of visiting one of these construction sites that was a joint collaboration between a Chinese firm and a Nepalese firm. That particular Nepalese firm, the firm that was actually doing all the work, they were incorporating some, tools and equipments and processes that I had never seen before in Nepalese construction industries, and that was unfortunately just due to the direct, influence of that Chinese firm. If that Chinese firm was not there, then the operation would have looked just as similar to any standard Nepalese firm that is existing right now. And the next one is lack of incentives, relationships with managers, knowledge codifications, lack of technical competency, and then inappropriate culture and context, fear of change, and unwillingness to change. These three things will be discussed at the end of our guest lecture when we discuss about the difference between cultures of different societies or different countries. There are more barriers to innovate. Risk in commercializing innovation, extensive inter-organizational change that is required. Like if you wanted to innovate, then you need extensive inter-organizational change. You can't just wake up one morning and decide, okay, so we're going to do things differently and everyone is going to come on board. That world does not exist. Trust me, I know, right? If I want to do things slightly differently, then I need to convince everyone from my father to my business partners to the staff that we're hiring to the manual workers that are actually working there. Everyone needs to be convinced that this particular change that we are about to do is going to work for the better. It is a very tasking process, but it needs to be done. So there are a lot of other barriers to innovate, and all of those unfortunately can't be discussed right now because we don't have a lot of time. Let's now look at what it takes to overcome these barriers. Yeah, there's just one very important topic remaining, Sunita Ma'am, so I'm just going to wrap it up very quickly now. So what does it take to overcome barriers, right? So these are things that is pretty widely used in not just the construction industry, but then in any industry that focuses on innovation or any industry that focuses on improving its functionality. It does not need to be limited to the construction industry, but it works just as well, right? So I'm just going to read it out, the methods, the elements that will assist organizations to overcome barriers to innovate. Support from upper management, owner-client support, organization culture, presence of innovation champion, communication, leadership, supportive working environment, collaboration with partners, deep understanding of the customers, education and training policy, encouraging staff to get involved with external networks, use of problem-solving techniques, awards, grants and funds, government schemes, reward schemes, and emphasis on R&D. If you want me to explain a few of these topics, then during our question answer session, you can definitely ask me. This is the last topic that I wanted to talk about, which is the culture. Now we know that there are drivers to innovate. We want to innovate, but then there are some barriers that are stopping us. And we also know how we can overcome these barriers, how we can move past these barriers and then innovate nonetheless. We know for a fact that for a particular country like Nepal, it is better to start with micro innovation than rather focusing on these large scale macro innovation, because economically, financially, based on everything, based on every external environmental constituencies, it just makes sense to start with micro. But then there's one more thing that we need to discuss, and which is the cultural differences. If you try to incorporate a sort of a technological solution to a problem, then that solution will be perceived in different lights in different countries that you will go to. That is the result of differing cultural differences. There are six elements to this: power difference, power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, long term orientation, and indulgence. These six criteria is what differentiates different countries, and how different countries respond to different actions of innovation. Right? We might want to do things. Okay, for an example, in a construction industry that I'm involved in a construction site that I'm involved with right now. It's not directly under our operation, but we're just like overlooking the operations. So we're planning to incorporate these, rebar tying drills, right? Rebar tying drills, and we're importing it from outside. So just that action of asking everyone to use these drills will result in different outcomes in different countries. In Nepal, there might be difficulties in having that turned into a reality. In South Korea, it might be easier. In Sweden, it might not even be a problem. And US, there things might be slightly difficult based on different situations. And these differences are due to the result of these six criteria. And these six criteria are as follows. Countries differ in these six cultural criteria, which are individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, power distance, time perspective, and um, indulgence versus restraint. These are the factors that we need to address at the end when we actually decide on incorporating some sort of innovative solution to a problem that we're facing. So at the end, after we understand how to overcome the barriers to innovate, we need to address these cultural differences as well. So now, before we move on towards the question answer section, the key takeaway of today's guest lecture is that micro innovation through technology entrepreneurship to incrementally improve the construction industry is the innovation that we need right now. So thank you so much. I would like to open the floor for any questions that you might have.
Does anyone has any questions? Who are the participants? I mean, you don't have to have any questions, right? If you have any comment or any reflections or any takeaways that you'd like to share, I think that is also okay. I know Trishik is very passionate about this topic, and then a lot of information has been shared. A lot, a lot of us are not from the background that Trishik is, but then I'm sure all of us has gained something. If there's any takeaways that you would like to mention, that is also okay. It doesn't necessarily have to be a question.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I had to rush a little bit at the end, and especially because that was the section that I did not want to rush too much, because that was the section that needed a lot of explanation. But then that's fine. I mean, if there are questions, then I would still answer them.
Sure, sure. Well, yeah, I do have one question, Trishik, but looks like Prajwal sir has one. So I would allow Prajwal sir first, and then
No,
I'll.
no, you go first, Kasandama.
Thank you, Prajwal
Mine
sir.
is actually not a question, just a
Okay.
remark, small.
I mean, this is a question that we've been talking back and forth, Trishik, because I'm so much interested about what happens next because of this pandemic that we're living at the moment. please tell us, what the world of construction and innovation looks like post COVID now.
I was actually just waiting for you. The question, ask me the question because you mentioned that you will ask me this question after the lecture was over. So this is where things get interesting and real at the same time because the thing that's happening right now, which is interesting, is that I'm happy. I'm having to manage a lot of construction projects while staying in my house, and the projects are going on in Birgunj and in other locations. Fortunately, none of these projects are, really large, and they don't demand my immediate attention. But then it is a project, and it does require your attention. So the way that we're doing that right now, I mentioned this term earlier through BIM, which is a building information model. So using that and using this, the thing that we're doing right now, virtual interactions and then video conferencing and things like that, we are making a maximum usage out of these technologies too, and we're combining all of these into a singular package, and we are enhancing the way that we can virtually monitor construction sites. Because even before the COVID pandemic, we were actually virtually monitoring construction sites because you can only be at one place at a time, right? But then we always had these multiple construction projects in multiple areas, so you can't be in multiple places at one time. And project managers have in fact been dealing with this issue for as long as it has been an issue, because project managers need to manage a lot of different projects at a particular time. So back then, before the COVID pandemic, we were using this BIM model, right? We have this software where we track every project and every raw material that is being used through data. And if there's something, if there's a miscalculation, if there's some data that does not make sense to the project manager, firstly, the project manager needs to be talented enough so that all of this data makes sense, right? All of the raw materials that are using, it makes sense. Are the raw materials that I see are being used in construction site number A, does that make sense, and is that up to our requirement? If it makes sense, then that's fine. The construction site is going as per it should be going, right? But then if it's not going, then we combine that with virtual, interactions. We call up the people, the overseer or the site manager who is available, and we try to solve that problem by not physically being there as far as it's possible. And if that is not possible, then that is the only reason why the project manager would go and visit these construction sites immediately. There's always a routine inspection time, like the project manager has one day for this particular site and another. So that always happened, and in some weeks, in a singular day, the project manager could in fact visit multiple construction sites. But now what's happening is that we can't go and visit these multiple construction sites. We have, during the lockdown, we could not go outside Kathmandu, and that is a point in time where we were actually monitoring these outside construction projects as well. So there is no easy way to say this, but the thing we're doing right now, virtual interactions, virtual online sessions, we are using technology such as this, but combined with our building information model to make virtual monitoring as easy as possible. So that is the
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure. I think this is we don't have an option rather than to be creative to adapt to this new normal, right? Because I think there was this very interesting conversation that I was going through the other day, and then the conversation was about remote work, and especially for the on-site essentials worker, like for example in all construction industry, where you demand certain workers to be on site, other than otherwise you can't get the work done. So what happens to them? So that was the type of conversation that these panelists were talking, and then the answer was, well, the world has to be ready for the digital revolution that is coming around, and then the COVID-19 has accelerated that need. So I think if we don't act smart, then we will be left out. That is so much in the conversation these days. So yeah, and I'm sure you in your industry are facing a lot of challenges, but But yeah, no options rather than to come up with the solutions, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah,
There does not exist a stone that has been left unturned
I'm
when it
sure.
comes to finding a way to monitor by being home and having to monitor the construction sites that are really far
Yeah,
from.
yeah,
So
yeah.
exploring every and any avenue that is possible to make that a reality. I think Minba has a very interesting
There's a
question.
question from Mingma, yes.
Yeah. Do you think Nepalese construction industries will be able to sustain and adapt if the new technology is brought? Do you think the human resources are enough capable and aware of the innovations, especially those who know how to use? Yeah. So I did mention a point, which was the knowledge area and having to train the employees as far as possible. But then this does require a bit of explanation. So it is in fact true that there exists a massive gap. If we just bring the technology and no one knows how to use it, then it's just not going to make sense, right? Because even right now, there are these construction equipments that even the most talented Nepalese contractor does not have any idea how to use. There do exist technologies such as these. So the only way to do this is through trial and error and through practice and through the contribution of these entities like FCAN. Like just like FCAN, there are associations in every industry in Mumbai because these entities are responsible for making sure that the industry in this particular economy is competitive enough with the outside industries as well. So, if entities like FCAN do a well enough job to train the contractors in Nepal and make them aware of the construction practices that are happening outside of Nepal, then we will probably be able to fill that gap. But then we can't just leave it to FCAN. There needs to be an individual effort as well. That is why we need innovation champions. We need people who are aware of what is happening outside so that we don't fall behind. So that when the time comes to use that technology, we will be able to address this gap and train our people accordingly so that we can use this technology. That is a very good question, and I really appreciate being asking that question. Um, Ashu, it will take some time, but it needs to be done. Yeah. Mingma, thank you so much. Prajwal sir?
Trishik, that was a nice presentation. Thank you very much. I don't have a question, actually, just my observation. Because in your slides, you have said innovation is producing, right? Manufacturing. Uh, Let me just quickly go. To make new things. Uh, do you have that data in construction sector or any other sector? Like how innovative are Nepalese industries from that perspective? Because as far as I see, the Nepalese, okay, whatever technology, like some of the slides you showed, all those were manufactured outside. We are yet to adapt those things, like because adapting is one thing, and manufacturing or producing something totally new, being creative is another thing, which we currently lack, I think. So first, we are yet to be aware of those things existing elsewhere, the building practices. We need awareness. Then again, we need to adopt it. Again, we need to make them better. That is another level of thinking. So that is my observation.
Yeah, sir. That is actually a very accurate observation. As things are going right now, the only way that we can surpass the international construction industries, is if we improve the rate of adoption and training and these micro innovation as well as macro innovation, and that in today's aspect unfortunately is not possible at all. The only thing that is possible is if we start incorporating these micro innovation practices as soon as possible, and that will eventually pave the step towards macro innovation. Maybe if we're lucky enough, the economy of Nepal will, be suitable enough for us to incorporate these macro innovation practices as well. But then, as far as the construction industry of today goes, the way that we can innovate and make things better right now in the Nepalese construction industry is by by incorporating these small incremental changes, which is in fact micro innovation. That is why I actually focus more on micro innovation because it is actually practical and possible to do start right now. Because it might be very a wishy-washy thing to say that yeah, we need to bring in new technology and robotics and these new machinery items in Nepal to do it, but then that would not be possible. So we need to address the limitation that we have, and we are nowhere even near the approach towards innovation that the external construction industries are using, right? So we are nowhere even near that. So so the quicker we can address our limitations, the quicker we can accept how far we have fallen behind in this industry, the quicker we can adopt micro innovation that will eventually lead towards technology entrepreneurship and macro innovation, hopefully.
Yeah, just to add on that, my last remark, maybe because I come from engineering background and my bachelor's was in engineering. So I don't know whether Trishik has visited engineering colleges. They need to do some mini projects and major projects. And
Exactly.
maybe the thing you just talked about, the incremental improvements, they don't think that big and all those things, but they have some unique ideas. But the many things is after they complete it, they are just
Yeah.
there. They are
Yeah.
just there, and because they are not marketed or they are not aware of how to market it, or maybe it hasn't fallen into the eye of those people like you who can find some value out of them. So there should be some kind of connecting points. I think a lot of engineering projects are there. So I don't know what's your thought on this.
That is a very important concern because I've worked with so many engineers who say that हामीले पढ्दाखेरि हामीले ग्रेजुएट गर्दाखेरि यति युनिक प्रडक्ट्स इनोभेटिभ प्रोसेसेसहरू युज गर्थ्यौँ होइन ग्रेजुएट हुनु जेलसम्म अनि when we step out into the real world, none of those things are used, and these construction companies that are owned by these old people, they don't want to listen to any of these innovative processes of doing things, and they just these new talented engineers, they just tend to forget all about it, and they just are forced to follow the norms that already exist. So the way to solve this issue is, yes, I mean, there are changes happening in the construction industries, and we are acknowledging the fact that we need innovative processes. But then we do need the support of these, entities like FCAN and entities that are powerful enough to assist these, innovation champions to have these innovative practices showcased in a level that is large enough so the construction companies can actually adopt them, can actually realize the benefit of that actually happening, and they can adopt it. That is very important.
That's true. The term innovation champion, I think that makes a whole lot of sense to connect these to, the business as well as the innovation, technological innovation.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Trishik. Yeah, thank you.
So, are there any more questions from anyone else? Okay, doesn't look like it.